All right, so now I'm just going to go ahead and enter the rest of my minutes. So this ADP visit, measuring, and etc. took about 10 minutes. My reassessment with Rodney Dangerfield took 15. My initial assessment with Wilma took 20. My reassessment with Barney was pretty quick. And my initial assessment with Betty was quicker than with Wilma. So I've entered all of my direct stats here. So I'm going to click on the save button to save my stats. And when I do, you'll see the daily total of minutes change here. And you'll see that as soon as I've saved my minutes, these services were billed. Now please notice here, TX means it's a treatment service that's being billed. AX means it's an initial assessment service being billed to the ministry. So I have two of those. Even though we're doing reassessments with the residents, it is a treatment service that's billed. Each resident can only have one assessment service billed because it's their initial assessment. Everything else, even though we're reassessing, it's always a treatment service. Okay, so let's enter our indirect stats as physios because we have to do documentation and it's usually pretty significant, like more than a check mark or a number 10 on the program log. I tend to enter my stats for each resident, so I'll just go in and do my stats for Joe. The other thing is, let me just close this. Well, I can open it again. For us, the PTs, we have to click on the actual modality to have this window open to always change the booking reason to either reevaluation or initial assessment, if that's what it is. If you're helping the PTA with a treatment and it's really a treatment and you're not doing any sort of reassessment, you can leave it as a treatment booking reason, but I think most of the time when we're seeing the residents, it's mostly to reevaluate some portion of their treatment. So I tend to usually change it to reevaluation, and I will change it to initial, as you'll see later when we enter those initial assessments. So for Joe Black, I did his documentation, which included filling out his quarterly reassessment sheet and also doing the note for nursing in the progress notes, either of the chart or in their software, and updating the program log if I need to. Here, I'll just double check and see we have the 3 Tinetti scores that were there from last time, so I will go ahead and enter some Tinetti scores for Joe Black. We'll enter the balance, the gate, and we've seen this in another video as well, how to enter these scores. And I'll update that. And once it's saved, my minutes add up here and I see how many indirect minutes I have for this resident. Okay, for the ADP equipment visit with Mr. Borgnine, it was a reevaluation because he's already on treatment. So even though it's an initial, perhaps it was the first time I saw him for an ADP walker assessment, it's billed as a treatment service, so it's considered a reevaluation in Coligo. The only time we pick initial assessment is if it's the very first time that we're seeing the resident ever and that it's an assessment service that's being billed. Okay, so I did need to document that I saw this resident in the progress notes of the resident's chart or in Point Click Care, Medicare, Gold Care, whatever it may be. So I will document that time that I spent, and I will also document the time that I spent filling out the application. I haven't done one in a while, so I'll just leave that at 20 minutes. I did also have to call the POA to find out who their preferred vendor was, and discuss the process with them a little bit. Make sure that they were okay with paying their 25%. So I'll enter that time for the phone call. And we do have this equipment thing here inside the booking, so we can actually go ahead and pick that we're doing a walker assessment for the resident. That way it will be, we're doing this just to keep track of what is being done with the resident. I won't enter a Tinetti score because I've already seen this resident before and I didn't do a Tinetti today. I did it last week, say for example. So I've entered the equipment. I don't need to enter a Tinetti and update. So there I've got my time related to the ADP visit and the direct time to take the measurements and discuss with the resident and stuff. So let's enter the time for Mr. Dangerfield. And I think he has Tinettis here, yeah. So I'll enter some Tinetti scores for him as well. And I'll also enter some unipedal stance with his eyes open, because I did that with him as well. And I'm done. Time's there. Okay, Wilma Flintstone. So here I will pick the initial assessment booking. I actually reviewed her chart before going to see her and spoke with the nurses. So actually, yes, if I'll just remove this chart here. If you've reviewed the chart and spoken with the nurse, you can add that in the comment. So you can put them both in the same category, that you reviewed the chart and discussed the resident with the nurse. That way it's, instead of doing it separately. And afterwards, the documentation took a little bit longer because I filled out her initial assessment form, did the treatment planning, the goals, etc. And did my note in the nurse's notes to let them know of her risk of fall or whatever. And I actually got her program log ready. If I have a chance to do so, I usually do so for my PTA. And we've got all the Tinetti things here, so I will be able to enter her scores. Or Wilma, at high risk of fall. So you pick from the big long list once, the very first time. You may have to search for Tinetti, as I showed you. Here, the first time that you enter stats for a resident and their Tinetti score, now you'll see that because we've picked Tinetti these 3 times, the next time you go in, those 3 that you picked will always be at the top, so it makes it easier that way. And let's update that. I didn't do any other testing with her. And Barney got reevaluated. And this was just a quick reeval, it wasn't a quarterly, so my note was not as long and I didn't have as much to do. And I didn't even have to do a Tinetti with him, it was my PTA who was asking me to reassess something with him. Let's go and enter Betty's initial assessment. And just to be different, enter them in the same thing instead of entering them separately. And actually Betty can't walk, so I did a Morse fall scale for her instead. So I'll just enter her score. Whoops. And I actually did the elderly mobility scale with her as well. And there we go. And that's done. All right. One thing I forgot to enter was my administrative booking, so I can enter my stats time and whatever else I might have done today. Just enter my indirect time. And this is a zero billing booking because it has nothing to do with actual residents. It's just an administrative booking, so I always change it to zero billing. And because I had 2 new residents, I had to go into the home screen of Coligo and create the new resident files, so my stats took me a little bit longer. So I'm just going to write that it took me 15 minutes to do my stats. And I had to discuss some things with my PTA with respect to the 2 new residents. And I also co-signed the program logs from since my last visit. And so my 4 hours is documented for, my time is all there. I put in the team time and everything's good. And I'm all done my stats for the day.